Well, let's stay with energy. Members of the parliamentary committee SCOPA yesterday grilled Eskom on why it could not say exactly when there will be an end to load shedding. But some South Africans are feeling more positive given the recovery plan that Eskom has presented. Now, the outgoing Eskom CEO, Ruyter, suggested there could be some reduction in rolling blackouts soon, maybe as soon as March, if money is provided for the power utility to buy diesel. And Eskom says 6,000 megawatts could be added to the grid over the next 2 years. Eskom says skills, time and money will be needed. But how much? Let's chat to the head of business intelligence at Hohm Energy, that's Matthew Cruz. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Cruz. So the diesel issue has been swirling around. A lot of debate because, of course, diesel is expensive and it goes up in smoke. You've got nothing to show for it at the end. But do you agree that this is one of the most important short-term interventions needed?
Yes, 100% agree, because getting diesel right now would impact us by shedding 2 stages of load shedding, because we're able to fire about 2,000 megawatts of diesel turbines, and that equates to 2 levels of load shedding. So if we had to have money right now, we would be able to cut the stages of load shedding by 2 in the immediate sense. I would argue that it's not a long-term solution, but we can go into more details about that.
Well, the president firstly has promised the money, and Ruyter has suggested March. So in between we have the February budget. How much is needed soon? Because of course government has also promised massive debt relief to Eskom as well.
Yeah, and that's the interesting interplay that we have. Last year we saw that they spent 15 billion rand on diesel as they were consistently firing the diesel turbines, and that was never meant to be the way that they were operated. They were installed 2007, 2008 as a method to meet the peak demand when we aren't able to meet that in the evenings and the mornings, and be intermittent to basically give emergency power when it's needed, because it does cost 10 times as much to create energy and electricity from gas-fired turbines as coal. But what we've been doing lately, we've just been firing them consistently because we have consistently not been able to meet the energy demand of the country. So the budget could look like even 20 billion rand this year for diesel if we're to kind of meet the same amount of load shedding reduction that we did last year. Yeah. But my predictions show that unfortunately we're going to have an escalation of load shedding this year overall, and about 50% more load shedding this year as opposed to last year.
Explain that. Is that despite the spend on diesel?
Yes, unfortunately so. It's because last year we saw that we were able to fire our diesel turbines with a little bit of disruption towards the end of the year when we ran out of money, and then there was an emergency procurement that took place. But unfortunately, for the last 5 years, we've seen a decline in the energy availability factor at the old coal-fired power stations. And that isn't an easy trend to turn around. 5 years of declining nature, because we've been firing our coal stations for the last 10, 15 years at maximum and pushing out maintenance. So that's a downward trend that's going to continue, and maybe by the end of the year we'll be able to stop the decline and have a bottoming out and a leveling out of that energy availability factor. But in that process, we're going to continue to see escalating load shedding, unfortunately. And that's what my analysis is telling me from looking at the way that the old power stations have been performing.
Tell us more. What does escalating load shedding mean? Because we've reached stage 6, which is incredibly intense and severe and painful for South Africans already. Yes.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. So to go more into it, our peak demand in the evenings increases in wintertime as people use electricity for heating and cooking and warming up the home. So we have a peak demand in the evenings at the moment of between 26,000 and 28,000 megawatts. And to give you some context, that's every stage of load shedding is 1,000 megawatts. So we then are in effect having 28 stages of load shedding in theory that's possible to be shed. And now when it comes to winter, we've got a peak demand of 32,000 to 34,000 megawatts in the evenings. So we're kind of relying on the maintenance taking place at the moment during summertime to be effective to help us when it comes to winter, for us to have more power on the grid when winter comes in July. But if everything had to remain equal and nothing really changed from this point onwards, that means that we'd have 4,000 megawatts that we wouldn't, more in wintertime, that we wouldn't be able to serve. And so we'd have an escalation of 4 more stages of load shedding if nothing else changed in winter, just because of seasonality. So we're hoping that the maintenance that's been taking place over the summertime will be able to compensate for that, and we might see only an escalation of 1 or 2 stages of load shedding, but I definitely see an escalation of load shedding in the middle of the year, and so then therefore we have escalating load shedding over the year.
Okay, so how scary? You're talking about stage 10 now, and cell phones don't work, emergency calls don't work. It'll be a mess. Eskom has spoken about diesel and then saying, look, 6,000 megawatts could be rescued over the next 2 years. So it is giving a large time frame. That seems to be contingent on Medupi and Kusile. And there's this focus on Kusile Unit 1, a technical explanation, how it's collapsed, how it's affecting the chimney that is shared with Unit 2 and 3. So that's another 2 stages, isn't it? But it sounds like a very complicated fix. How optimistic are you around that?
So what the information that we're getting from Medupi and Kusile, well, first of all, there's one unit that's exploded at Medupi that's going to take about 2 years to come back online. And the information about Kusile, those 3 units that are not being able to be functional at the moment because the one chimney that is used by all 3 collapsed. And the estimations is that's going to take 2 years to fix and for those units to come online. The earliest estimation is like 1.5 years for the other 2 units that aren't directly affected by that chimney. And that's alone, those 4 units that I just mentioned in the new power stations that, you know, when you spend 3 times the amount and waited twice as long for a new power station, you would hope that it's not having these kinds of catastrophic failures. Those failures are accounting for about half of the load shedding that we're seeing at the moment. The other half is due to the declining aged power stations that I mentioned previously.
All right, and you're saying let's just hope that the maintenance works because that's all we have in the time frame of 2 years, and diesel while we wait for everything to come on board. There's potential relief in the form of feed-in tariffs, though, and that's on the horizon. Individuals and companies with solar panels can feed into the grid. Is that a wave that we should have started riding years ago?
Yes, so 100% agreed. And the company that I work for, Hohm Energy, that's what we're in. That's what the business that we're doing. And that's what I've chosen to kind of plug into because that's where I see the biggest growth in South Africa. And to give you some idea of how that can really help a nation, in Vietnam, the government made a decision to incentivize solar for its people by introducing a feed-in tariff. And we're seeing that kind of feed-in tariff being trialed and implemented now in Cape Town. And in Vietnam, within 1 year, they managed to incentivize their population to install 9,000 megawatts worth of solar panels across all of their homes' roofs. And 9,000 megawatts represents 9 stages of load shedding in South Africa, and that's within 1 year. So if the government had to get their act together and had to roll out an incentivization program for solar, and that's only the feed-in tariff. You can also incentivize the purchase of a solar system by giving a rebate or a tax rebate for the purchasing of it. If the government had to take that tax, within 1 year, we could actually see the reduction of load shedding completely. But as we know, there's many parts to play and many interests at work when it comes to the South African government, ANC government particularly.
All right, so you're saying politics, possibly political will holding this up, but that's incredible. 9 stages of load shedding, or 9,000 megawatts, could be created just through solar panels being fed in, that energy being fed into the grid. Thank you very much. We'll have to leave it there. Matthew Cruz, Hohm Energy, Head of Business Intelligence.